to move over the last number of years have been followed up with, I'll say, in a lackluster manner. In the last 2 years, we've seen some progress. Just as an example, of course, you know that on issues like worker safety equipment, first aid kits, tire measurements, and so on. Each of these things on their own doesn't sound like a big deal, but they add up. And there are literally hundreds and hundreds of these types of impediments to our ability to do business with each other that shouldn't be there, that overcomplicate and that, frankly, I think discourage people from getting involved in small business enterprises and so on. So this is a good progressive step today. I've heard commitment to continue working. I'm definitely interested in pursuing that, as I know Steve McNeil is, and I want to compliment Nova Scotia's Premier as well. He's been a pleasure to work with on this file, and I look forward to working with him in the future.
And timeline have you set for this in terms of actually making concrete progress?
There are a number of, that's a great question. There are a number of timelines that have already been established on about 20 items that we've been advancing over the last few months. Some of those are by year end, others early in the first quarter. There are processes, for example, that have to be pursued that are more complex, like business registration. That's a tricky one. But in terms of things like first aid kits, booze, these are issues that we have made progress on. We've got 9 provinces agreeing now to have no limits on personal use transport. That's positive advancement. More needs to be done, and there's always the criticism that these are no-brainers and they should have been dealt with decades ago. Yeah, right. Well, second best time to plant a tree is now. Should have been done 30 years ago, I agree. Wasn't, so we're dealing with it now.
So why does it take so long? I don't understand.
Why does it take so long? Because every province, you've heard it today. We've got provinces that are dealing with an oil crisis right now. They've got other priorities. And those other priorities stemming from crisis or frankly from just concerns around local issues often take precedence over these national concerns. But we're a Canadian family. We need to trade with each other. And when we're impeding each other's ability to do business, I think it's obvious to most Canadians that this is an issue that should have been dealt with a long time ago. We're dealing with it now. I'm pleased with the preliminary indications of willingness to work, and I'm committed, as I have been, to seeing real progress achieved.
On carbon tax, did you hear anything today that struck you as new? I ask because Ontario officials are suggesting that the Prime Minister is moving the goalposts.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I think that we have to take a look at things. We've talked about, and the federal government's invested in a pipeline, right? Massive project, billions of dollars of investment. We need another kind of pipeline in this country. We need a green pipeline, a hydro pipeline. We need that pipeline to connect us to one another so we do green energy better and more frequently, and we address our climate commitments, our carbon reduction commitments more effectively as a team. And so that issue was advanced today, and I think with some embracing of the proposals that some of us have brought forward.
What Mr. Legault said about this green pipeline?
Oh, you'll have to ask Mr. Legault.
Did the Prime Minister, though, tell some provinces that they need to further their targets in order to help out others?
Well, that's been a talking point for a while. I don't think that would be a new thing. I won't say what individual people said today, but it wouldn't be a surprise if the Prime Minister said that.
So you've been told before that some provinces will need to do more than 30% reduction.
Well, that's self-evident when you impose a backstop. Again, I'll say, as I've said before, Manitoba takes great pride in its green record, and we have a green plan which the minister herself has said is the best in the country. So, I can only say that I believe our plan, as proposed, was a reasonable and viable and stringent proposal. It was rejected by the federal government, so we'll proceed with our green plan. We hope that some of the federal government's low carbon economy fund will be directed to projects we can partner on, because that does make sense. But as far as carbon tax, we'll watch.
For hydro, what did you hear from the feds on that specifically? What did you have a specific ask?
Well, yeah. Well, for a specific example, I suppose we have a Saskatchewan neighbor that needs to get going on more hydro use and displace some of its high carbon sources of energy. And we've signed recently a deal with Saskatchewan to market hydro to them. But we could build on that network. And so it's a good opportunity. I think it's a win-win, clearly, not just for Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but also for a federal government that wants to see us meet our Paris commitments.
So you mean today there was momentum on the agreement you'd already
Yeah,
signed?
momentum on one that we've already, well, not on the agreement itself, on the tie, on the line. The proposal being we build a line to increase capacity to allow us to flow hydro to our neighbor. Yeah, I'm giving you a specific example right now.
And like today, what happened? The Fed said yes to that idea?
Oh, we
or they...
didn't. I can't tell you we signed a deal in there just now,
Yeah.
but I'm hopeful that we can move forward on that project for sure. It's a viable and worthwhile project, but it's one of many that we need to pursue to get green energy flowing across our country.
Premier, the goal of these meetings used to be to get unanimous agreement on specific wording on specific issues.
Yeah.
Did that happen on anything today?
Well, they're working on the wording right now because I have to fly out early, Paul. That's why I've slipped away to talk to you. I would only say that on the issue of interprovincial barriers to trade, that perfection is the enemy of the good. Because when you need everybody to agree, they don't. 99 times out of 100 on interprovincial trade barriers. So it's one of those categories. I agree with you on consensus on moving on certain key issues other than that one, but certainly on that one, perfection has been the enemy of the achievement of any real progress. What I can tell you now is most of the provinces agree to reduce the barriers down to nothing on personal transport of alcohol, as one example. I think territories and provinces that didn't of the 13 would be for. I think that if we're going to move ahead on reg reduction as one example, interprovincial trade barriers as another, that what we have to start doing is being more transparent as provincial leaders about what we're doing and what we're not doing. And if some of the premiers don't want certain regulatory changes, they can say so.
So
I think that's the right way to deal with these issues going forward, not to say, well, let's all agree before we can take a step forward. We don't need to walk in lockstep here.
But was there any unanimous agreement on any issue other than interprovincial trade barriers?
Oh, I would say the green hydro thing is something that everybody can embrace.
Is there an outcome here from this meeting that everybody's...
Well, the communique is being developed right now, Kemp, so I can't tell you that. You're going to read it when it comes out. Look, I've been around these a little bit of time. You've been around them longer than I. I don't put as much stock in the communiques as I do in the actual actions that follow. To me, that's the real progress, not the talk, the actual walking after.
How would you describe the general tone of this meeting?
General tone was very positive. I think that the premiers are committed to this country. That was obvious. That's nice to see because many of you have covered meetings where such was not the case in the past. Committed to the country of Canada, committed to working together on a number of worthwhile initiatives. That's a powerful thing, and that set the tone. The Prime Minister is a congenial human being, and he, I think, did an admirable job of building on that goodwill as we went through the meeting. Clearly, there were existing divisions on a number of issues, right? You've reported on those. I don't need to repeat them, but the reality is that we're thinking people, so we're not always going to agree.
And on the targets, so what do you think is reasonable then if there's going to be, variety in how much people in different provinces reduce their emissions by?
Yeah.
What's sort of the upper and lower limit that you think is reasonable?
I think it's reasonable to have measurements, to measure real measurements, real outcomes. Yeah, I won't get into the specific terminologies, but it's reasonable to have accountability and to have real measurements and timeframes. So good.
But
We'll do that. We're ready to compete. We're ready to compete with anybody on green. We're investing close to $20 billion in green hydroelectric production in Manitoba. So being told that we have to then when Manitoba is told that their level flat tax like the Prairie Horizon isn't acceptable to the federal government, we take exception to that because we're investing billions of dollars without a dollar from the federal government in green energy right now. So really, I'm not interested in having a fight with the Prime Minister today on this issue, but ultimately we have to agree to disagree on the approach.
But for Manitoba, are you expecting to do more than 30%? Do you think, and how much more then?
Well, again, part of this is going to be influenced by the willingness of the federal government to partner with us, right? I just mentioned on the example of the Green Pipeline as one, but there are many others. The federal government has said there's a low carbon economy fund available. We've already had several applications rejected. We hope that we don't get them all rejected. We hope this is about fighting carbon, not fighting with each other.